Roberts, and this is my studio, Tower Art Studio on Guemes Island. I'm an artist who has been doing her artwork for a long time. I've worked in a lot of different materials, from clay, glass, wood, metal, and right now predominantly I work with the figure and work in clay. We built this studio about 20 years ago. I always envisioned being able to not just do my own work here, but also offer classes and workshops and actually bring in other artists to do workshops here. And I've been doing it about 10 years, and it's been a great experience for me. I love teaching, I love learning, meeting new people, inspiring new people. They inspire me. So it's been a really positive experience for me. In high school, I always thought I was going to be a cartoonist. That was really my focus. I'd had a lot of art classes growing up, but it seemed like I loved to draw cartoons. I loved to read Mad Magazine. I just was really, I was certain I was going to be a cartoonist. So when I went off to college, I studied animation and a little bit of cartooning, but I took a clay class my sophomore year, and I loved it. I loved working with, I loved the clay, I loved working with a figure. So this is the sort of thing I ended up doing in college, which so I was doing three-dimensional sort of social commentary about people and their lives. This piece was about drive-throughs that had just really sort of come to, and the whole idea of people just driving up in their cars, ordering dinner, even though there were drive-throughs from years ago where people on roller skates came up to your window. This was more like everybody was putting in drive-throughs. Banks, we had a little grocery store that had a drive-through where I lived, and then obviously the fast food. So it was about just that family hour where you're in the car with your family having your meal and just sort of the family interactions. After I graduated from college, I didn't have access to a studio or a kiln, so I started working in metal. I actually had a career as a metal sculptor at the time, and I started to work with sheet metal. And one of the things I did was I would just cut it out with shears, just using regular cutting shears, and then I would rivet the pieces together. And I loved the challenge of trying to make the sheet metal look like folded fabric or little bows, and just crimping it and cutting out different shapes to get these sort of wild forms. And I did abstract forms that I painted, but I also did a whole series on fashion, on clothing, on shoes. This is the studio that I work in. I also teach classes in here, and it's set up right now for COVID protocols, safety protocols, and so a lot of the tables are spread out. I have up to 6 people in the studio at a time, which is very different from how it usually is. I mainly do clay classes in here. I've done some metal work, some metal classes in here. But right now, most of my students want to work in clay. We hand build, and it's pretty amazing what some of the students have been making. And I fire all the work in my electric kiln that's out in my kiln shed. So we're going to go take a look at that so you can get a sense of what does an electric kiln look like. So a lot of people, sometimes they're worried, like, oh no, it's an electric kiln, it's going to blow up, or it's going to set the building on fire. I think of it at times as it's as safe as having an oven in your house. Even though it gets red hot and goes up to 2,000 degrees, at least mine does, it's still relatively safe. Kiln shed. These are the kilns that I use. When I first started working in clay, and the kilns that we used, always have used electric kilns, never really used gas. you'd have to go out, you'd have to turn them up every few hours because you always want to take the temperature up slowly. And then you'd have to make sure that the kiln shut off at night, and you'd come up, depending on where your kiln was. You're always checking your kiln, either turning it up, turning it on, turning it off. Well, now they have kilns where it's all on this little pad. I can punch in the temperature I want the kiln to go to. I can preset it so that it'll turn on 3 hours from now or 12 hours from now. And I can also be down at my house and look at my phone. I have an app and I can tell what temperature it's firing at, whether it's complete. So it's all pretty basic now. All I have to do is load it. They haven't figured that part out yet, how to load it for me. So one of the things that I thought maybe I'd show today is how I build faces, mainly faces, and I've just started working at this size again. For a long time, I did not like this size. It's actually harder to work this small, but I've been at the new year. I thought, I'm gonna do a head a day. Well, that didn't happen. Mainly because I have to let the clay sit and set up. When I start with a ball of clay just out of the bag, it's really soft. And so what I often tell students, you have to give the clay time to sort of firm up so that you can really work with it, add to it, and then a lot of times you take away. And so the clay has to be a certain consistency when you do that. So for me, there's a lot of waiting in between. Sometimes I put it in front of a fan or I use a hairdryer to try to help speed up the process. But usually what I do is I have like 4 heads going all at once, and I just sort of go from one to the other, depending. I started this yesterday, this little head, and often I tell people when I get started on working with a head, especially one this small, they always look I always feel like it's as though I've never done it before. They feel awkward. I often think, geez, what is this going to look like, a dog? But at the same time, I know enough to know that I'm doing this in stages. It's going to take a little back and forth of adding, taking away. All about building out, adding on, taking away. This is the process I love. You just get sort of in that place where you just who is this person, and are they going to have this big massive forehead? Are they going to have, what are their eyes going to, what shape are their eyes going to be? I'm going to start putting the little mouth on what looks like a big cigar or mustache. And then I like to sort of angle it up into the nose. Look at the profile. The forehead's slanting back quite a bit, so I'll probably fill that in. Since I'm using soft clay, I'm not scratching on, but I am pressing pretty hard with my thumb. You don't want any air pockets in when you're attaching pieces. That's what ends up, if there are air pockets in the kiln, if it gets fired too fast, that's what ends up blowing up. A lot that goes on in the studio, working with clay, sculpting figures, hand building teacups and pitchers, platters. We have students, we have kids. It's a really inspiring place for me to be, and you're welcome to visit anytime.